Today we're going to try and keep the Black Rage suppressed for long enough to start ourselves a Blood Angels army. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking Blood Angels, and in particular talking about starting Blood Angels for 9th edition Warhammer 40K. The Sons of Sanguinius are certainly one of the most popular Space Marine chapters around. After all, what's not to love about a blood-red Angel of Death slamming into the enemy at terminal velocity, propelled by a massive jump pack? In the video we'll talk about why you might want to collect a Blood Angels army, then move on to planning one out, thinking about first purchases, a few ideas for expanding the army, and then one potential idea for a Blood Angels army list. So first up, why would you want to collect the Sons of Sanguinius? I think first up, lore-wise, they are one of the chapters with some of the more compelling and interesting history. Self-sacrificing exemplars among Space Marines, mighty heroes that are marred by a fatal flaw, with any member of its chapter liable to be struck down by the Black Rage as they're haunted by the death visions of their dying Primarch, who was famously slain by War Master Horus himself at the climax of the Horus Heresy. The martyrdom of Sanguinius resounds throughout the chapter, and many of its most noble and proud members have been struck down by the Black Rage, devolving into a state of perpetual madness and bloodlust, fit only to join the ranks of the Death Company and seek a glorious death in close combat, hopefully taking a good number of the enemies of mankind with them. Inspired by their winged Primarch, the Blood Angels particularly enjoy fighting from the skies, and compared with most other chapters, they'll have a massive preference for jump infantry, fielding far more amongst their ranks, whether they're Death Company, Sanguinary Guard, or Assault Marines. Models-wise, compared with plenty of the other chapters, they have really quite an extensive range, a whole ton of special characters, many of which have angelic or vampiric tones to them, plenty of unique or customized units, such as their Death Company, Sanguinary Guard, unique range of Dreadnoughts, and the Baal Predator, and they've got a couple of alternatives to the standard Space Marine kits. The Blood Angels have their own unique Tactical Squad and Terminator Assault Squad on sale. In general for them, there isn't really very much Primaris model support, most of their unique stuff is locked to Firstborn at the moment. For Primaris models, they only have their very nice new sculpt of Mephiston, a Blood Angels Lieutenant, and the Blood Angels upgrade sprue, which they can use to make Death Company intercessors, though admittedly this sprue is a bit on the basic side. In-game, Blood Angels are all about close combat. Their chapter tactic is maybe the most defining thing about them, getting them easier advances and charges so they get to melee faster, and when they get there they get a devastating +1 to wound when they charge in, which means that just about any Blood Angels unit can be a decent threat to the enemy in melee, even more so than most Space Marines. A lot of their stratagems and other options also excel around buffing combat, things like being able to redeploy their jump packs or getting better hit rolls after they've come in from reserve. Power level wise at the moment, I admit that they're probably not the strongest Space Marine assault army out there. The previous codex did take away a few of their nicest options, including easy charges out of reserve and jumping across the board in one turn, though I really wouldn't say that they're all that far behind their competitors. Blood Angels army lists still occasionally surprise and punch above their weight in competitive tournaments, though I'd not exactly say that they're one of the strongest armies in 40k right now. Finally, price-wise, I would say that the Blood Angels are quite good. Being Space Marines, they're quite an elite army, so you don't need all that many models, and Space Marines have access to an absolute ton of discount kits, as we'll get onto in a bit, giving you a ton of different options for acquiring those models without spending too much. If we get into planning a Blood Angels force, if you want to start thinking up an army list for your Blood Angels, I'd recommend having an experiment around with their rules. Either you can pick up Codex Blood Angels or Space Marines, or perhaps mess around with points costs on things like the 40k app. I believe the free version still has the points costs, and there's also unofficial resources available such as Warhapedia or Battlescribe. You can always try out some example armies in things like Tabletop Simulator or using Proxib models. If you want any guidance and answers to some simple questions, I'd recommend looking up some Blood Angels social media groups. Blood Angels and Space Marines are both quite well represented in Facebook groups, subreddits and Discord servers, so feel free to give those a search. The advice that you get might be a bit variable, but there's nothing like getting some opinions from a bunch of other collectors. Watching YouTube or other tactics related articles for them isn't a bad idea either. I do have a few videos for Blood Angels and Space Marines in general on the channel. I'll leave a link to my overview of Blood Angels in 9th edition down in the video description. Hopefully that should give people a bit of an overview for how they're doing right now. And it might well be worth checking out a rather good YouTube channel called Blood Angels Commander. There's nothing like an entire strategy channel dedicated to your own army. I'll leave a link to his channel down in the video description too. When planning your army, it might well be worth thinking about a 500 point or 25 power level force to start off with. Build up a good starter block for an army, and then if you get those assembled and painted, you can start playing some early games. Always good for a bit of experimentation, seeing what works, and getting you a bit more inspiration for carrying on the project. We'll talk about putting that together in a second, but otherwise you can think about planning out an initial 2000 point list. Consider any variations in colour scheme that you might want to go for. You could certainly paint in an alternate colour scheme and just use Blood Angels rules if you like to. That could give you a little bit of flexibility with using your models for other chapters too. Or you could even think about going Flesh Tearers, a really interesting Blood Angels successor with their own rules, but be aware that in-game they might be a bit more of a challenge at the moment. Their chapter tactics are a little bit worse and it'll lock you out of a few characters. You can also think about how you want your Blood Angels force to look. Do you want it to be absolutely all about the melee rush, or do you want a bit more of a combined arms approach to your Space Marine army? If you're playing Blood Angels and you aren't using at least some assault units, then you're kind of doing it wrong, I think. But that's not to say that they can't be supported by some decent quality guns as well. Most of the best lists in 40k do tend to mix a little bit of shooting and melee. So once you've got a rough plan in your head, let's talk about a few potential first steps. At some point you're generally going to want to pick up the Blood Angels and Space Marine codexes, which are a little bit unfortunate for Space Marine players. It means that if you want to have the full rules for Blood Angels, you do have to get both books. I would say that the Space Marines one is probably more important than the Blood Angels supplement, as the Space Marine one has all the standard Space Marine datasheets in it, as well as the points cost and the Blood Angels chapter tactic. All of that can allow you to field a Blood Angels playable army, though basically all of the Blood Angels unique things, their Death Company and Sanguinary Guard, all of their Warlord traits and relics and things, they're all in the supplement. If not springing for both of them at once, I'd probably go for the Space Marines book first though. When starting most armies, the first thing that I'd look at are any discount bundles available for the army. Unfortunately, Blood Angels have quite a few available between the starter sets and the various combat patrols, but I'd also prioritise anything that you find particularly fun or inspirational about the Blood Angels. Even if it might not be the most optimal thing to pick up straight away, if it's going to inspire you to keep on with the project, then it could well be worth it. Some sort of jump pack assault would certainly be high on my list, and some of the special characters look very nice indeed. As for discount sets though, I would certainly bear in mind the generic 40k starter sets, the Space Marines vs Necron ones. If you are new to 40k in general, then the Assault Intercessors, Outriders, and the characters are all pretty decent for Blood Angels as they go. They're all assault orientated, which is at least a start. It also means that all of these should be going a little bit cheaper second hand as well. So if you did want to pick up some Assault Intercessors for the battle line, you might be able to get them at a knockdown price. Still, just splitting one of these sets with a Necron player could be a great way to get your hands on some first models. Otherwise, the Blood Angels Combat Patrol is worth a mention. This one's £85, €110 or 140 US dollars, and the kit includes a Primaris Librarian, 5 Intercessors, 5 Incursors or Infiltrators, 3 Aggressors, an Impulsor Transport, and 2 Blood Angels upgrade sprues. I think people have quite mixed feelings about this one. You do get quite a few solid Primaris models, and those upgrade sprues are kind of helpful, but I can see why people say that it's not exactly very Blood Angels feeling, with a lot of ground-bound troops, and perhaps that's more of a symptom of the unique Blood Angels units still mainly just being available in Firstborn form, not Primaris. As they go though, I think the choices aren't terrible. The Intercessors and Incursors I think are particularly handy, decent choices for holding down objectives, and your opponents will certainly feel their countercharge with mass strength 4 attacks with +1 to wound. The Aggressors are okay in assault, and maybe that Impulsor could be used to transport some Blade Guard or something. The upgrade sprues are a little bit limited, but they could be helpful if you do want to get some Blood Angels iconography on the shoulder pads, without having to either freehand it on or use transfers. It's maybe a box that I'd be tempted to get one of, but maybe not multiple copies, and maybe just doesn't feel quite as assault orientated compared with the things in the starter sets, the Assault Intercessors and the Outriders. Otherwise, there's quite a lot of combat patrol boxes available for Marines. Here are 4 others. Again, they're all £85, €110 or 140 US dollars, and they'll generally put about 500 points worth of Marines on the board. I think they're all kind of okay. Probably the Deathwatch one is my least favourite for Blood Angels here. It's quite similar to the Blood Angels Combat Patrol itself, and in general I'd rather have a Sanguinary Priest rather than a Primaris Apothecary, and the Lieutenant's nothing special. Otherwise though, the generic Space Marine one is really focused on the Phobos Marines, Infiltrators are kind of okay whatever Space Marine army you play with, Suppressors could be alright with their jump packs I suppose, and Eliminators are generally strong. The Space Wolf one gets you Reavers, Intercessors and an Invictor Tactical Warsuit, maybe the most value if you really want the Invictor. I would bear in mind that the character there does look a little bit on the Space Wolf side, but I'm sure you could modify him to look a bit more Blood Angels if you wanted. And then the Dark Angels one I think is perhaps one of the more impressive ones. Intercessors are useful, Inceptors are pretty decent in Blood Angels, as you can drop them down and use that stratagem to have them hitting on 2s, and a Redemptor Dreadnought is pretty much some of the best firepower that Space Marines can get right now, so it doesn't really hurt to throw in at all. As well as this, if you can get your hands on any other copies of the Indomitus box out there, that one's also very nice for Blood Angels. Similar to the Start Collecting boxes, its massive assault orientation means it's pretty nice for the boys in red. With Blood Angels liking to fight from the sky so much, there are a couple of helpful ways to get more jump packs and more customization into the army. First, I would be aware that Games Workshop does sell a small pack of jump packs directly from them, something that people might not be super aware of. For 5 jump packs it costs you £5, €6.50 or $8.25. They're a bit plain looking, but they could be good to swap out certain backpacks of characters to make jump characters, or help with kit bashing things like Vanguard Veterans or Death Company. Talking of which though, the actual Death Company and Vanguard Veteran kits are both really quite good wealths of resources for combat material and also fancy jump packs. I certainly strongly recommend the Death Company frame just from personal experience. Even after you've built a squad with a load of ton gear, you'll have a ton of bits left over, things that you could use in kit batches for other more generic kits in the rest of the army, a load of fancy shoulder pads, Blood Angels-esque heads, bolters and chainswords. Some of them do have the Death Company crosses sculpted onto them, some of them don't, but they can be a good way of adding a whole ton of flavour to other miniatures. Certainly some combination of the Vanguard Veteran kit and Death Company kit can be a really good way of manufacturing your own Space Marine Smash Captains and other jump characters. Just choose a bunch of the more ornate bits and put them together, and maybe mount them on a nice scenic base to set them apart. Can be a really nice alternative, particularly given the premium that Games Workshop often charges for character miniatures. Moving on, after you've got your first force together and have started playing a few games, you can think about expanding towards a 2,000 point army, perhaps one of the more common points values played in games. Generally, I'd mentioned that when you're picking up 40k kits, I generally think about expanding in small jumps rather than buying everything all at once. Plans might change and your enthusiasm for the project might wax and wane. Usually there's not a lot of value in having a bunch of kits sitting around, so there's usually no harm in holding off until you've actually got the first miniatures assembled and put together. I'd certainly consider discount retailers and second-hand markets for Space Marine models. For example, if you're in the UK, there's an Element Games link down in the video description. They usually give 10 to 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures, and can be a good way to add even more discount onto things like those Combat Patrol boxes. That is an affiliate link, by the way. Any purchases made through it do help to support the channel, and there's plenty of other shops that sell things at discounts across the world. Second-hand markets for Space Marines also tend to be quite good as well. They've been around for a really long time. It's often worth checking out things like eBay or local Facebook marketplace groups. Sometimes you can find some bargains. Finally, I would remember that rules change. What you buy at the moment isn't always likely to remain the absolute optimal thing for Blood Angels over time. Games Workshop does quite often rebalance the game, and there's every chance that things might get better or worse for the Sons of Sanguinius in the future. In general though, all that aside, once you've got a small force on the go, I'd certainly think about having a decent amount of my army being some jump pack assault units, some hefty melee damage dealers that can really mix it up in close combats and provide one of the main threats of your force. Sanguinary Guard are a really solid unit in 9th edition 40k. I think they perhaps have the best all-round stats between their 2+ armor save, reasonable shooting, huge amount of damage 2 attacks in combat, and a couple of helpful stratagems. Though I would bear in mind that there's really quite a lot of damage -1 mechanics out there in 9th edition now, and this is maybe taking a bit of the shine off the boys in gold. Whenever they encounter things like Death Guard, Dreadnoughts, or Orc Ramshackle vehicles for example, they're going to be hitting half as hard as they normally would. Still though, I do think that quite a lot of strong Blood Angels armies will typically include some of these. Otherwise, Vanguard Veterans are a really solid alternative. Perhaps one of the most default loadouts for them is taking a Storm Shield and a Lightning Claw and a jump pack. It makes them fast, tough, and relatively general purpose melee troops. +1 to wound combined with re-rolling wound rolls is a really nice combo, and it means that you're guaranteed to stack some saves on whatever you target. Only being damage 1, they're really quite general purpose. They absolutely blend light infantry, and can certainly punch up against other things. Death Company are perhaps a little bit more fragile, with no 2+ armor or storm shields. They do have their feel no pain though, and perhaps one of their most useful things is being able to threaten a turn 1 charge via a stratagem. When they get to melee, they do hit massively hard as well, particularly amped up with things like Thunderhammers. Finally, Blade Guard Veterans don't have jump packs, but I think they are still well worth consideration as well. They're very tough compared with the rest with their 3 wounds plus storm shields and transhuman physiology, and like the Sanguinary Guard, their strength 5 damage 2 power swords really enjoy that +1 to wounds. In general, I'd certainly be looking to have a solid contingent of melee damage dealers, and then to back them up you could have some troops, characters and ranged support. Troops-wise, Blood Angels get on pretty well with the Intercessors, Assault Intercessors, and the Phobos armoured troops. Strength 4 multi-attack Primaris can really punch above their weight when they get +1 to wound and they get their assault doctrine on the go. They're pretty nice for bullying and beating up the other enemy troop choices when they're scrapping for objectives. Character-wise, perhaps some of the more valuable support units are the Sanguinary Priests or Sanguinary Ancients. The Priests have the nice ability to put units in Assault Doctrine early, as well as doing all the normal apothecary things, 6+ Feel No Pain, restoring models from the dead, and healing anyone who gets injured. Pretty nice to have that all on a fast-moving platform, though I'll admit he does cost a fair amount of points for all that utility. The Ancient's an interesting choice with the extra movement that he can give via a relic, though again a touch on the pricey side. Otherwise, I think that Blood Angels have really good value from cheap captains or lieutenants, in particular punching up with things that are strength 5 like mastercrafted power swords or perhaps the Teeth of Terror, and maybe a bit more speed from either a bike or jump pack, though to be honest the Indomitus pattern ones with the storm shields aren't too bad at all. Finally, for range support, generic strong Space Marine choices can be quite nice. You certainly don't have to go all in on the Blood Angels assault forces. Having a few really powerful guns can really help support the advance. Things like Redemptor Dreadnoughts, Eradicators, Attack Bikes, or the Forge World Contemptor Dreadnoughts with Volkite Culverins, all of those are some of the strongest Space Marine range choices at time of recording. Finally, just as an example of what a Blood Angels force could look like in 9th edition, here's one rough list idea, maybe something that you could build roughly towards. For the troops, there's some Incursors and Intercessors to hold some objectives, some heavy-hitting elites with a big unit of Death Company and a massive 25 Sanguinary Guard, a bit of mobile anti-tank fire support from a bunch of attack bikes, and then the forces led by a captain on bike with a storm shield and the Teeth of Terror, a chaplain on bike who can hit incredibly hard with the benediction of fury and mantra of strength, and a fast-moving sanguinary priest with jump pack who's the chief apothecary with a selfless healer rule. Maybe just a very rough idea of what one Blood Angels force could look like. You could easily swap out a bunch of different elements for something else, maybe trading the characters around, and losing some of that mass amount of sanguinary guard for some other units, maybe some Vanguard vets, or some more troops or fire support. So anyway, I hope that's been at least some food for thought if you're thinking about getting into a Blood Angels army anytime soon. By all means, if you are an experienced Blood Angels general, feel free to leave any other tips down in the comments below. I'm sure any other advice for neophytes to the army would be greatly appreciated. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, hopefully with a few more bits here and there for the Sons of Sanguinius. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the content on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Making all this content does take a fair amount of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.